Picture this, a vast labyrinth of dusty archives and forgotten journals, papers from the 19th century that whisper of modern human bones, entombed within geological layers, millions, even hundreds of millions of years old, asking the question, what if the relics of human existence predate humanity by eons? You're entering the world of forbidden archaeology, here on Things Visible and Invisible. Michael Cremo is a freelance researcher, self-described Vedic creationist and alternative archaeologist. He is also the co-author of Forbidden Archaeology, The Hidden History of the Human Race, a work that compiles archaeological findings suggesting humanity may be much older than we are told. And he joins me down the line from his home in California. Michael, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Good to be here with all your viewers.
Michael, let's start at the beginning, which is probably very apt if we're talking about archaeology. Let's start by a definition, because we all think we know what archaeology is. What is forbidden archaeology?
Forbidden archaeology is archaeological discoveries that don't fit the current mainstream consensus on human origins and antiquity. Now, if you look in the current textbooks, you'll see many archaeological discoveries, but they all fit the overall paradigm, holding that humans like us first appeared on this planet less than 300,000 years ago. And it seems pretty convincing. Here's the evidence. Here's what our conclusion is. Everything seems very tightly wrapped up. But if we look beyond what's in the textbooks, if we look at the actual history of archaeology, if we dig back into the original reports by archaeologists, geologists, and other scientists digging into the earth, we find there are many discoveries that contradict that paradigm, showing that humans like us have been present on this planet for far longer periods than a few 100,000 years.
Where and when did you first stumble upon this, Michael, and get into the whole subject of ancient archaeology?
Well, that has to do with some experiences I had when I was growing up. Once I was traveling in Europe as a very young man, and I ran into some people who had traveled overland from Europe to India. Of course, this was back at a time when that was still possible, but they had spoken to me about their experiences in India. So I became interested in Indian philosophy, and I began looking into some of the ancient Sanskrit writings that talk about cosmology and history. And in those writings, I encountered histories showing that humans have been present, human civilizations have been present on this planet for vast periods of time. So I thought, well, is that simply some mythology, or is there perhaps some evidence to back it up? So that's what got me looking into these discoveries beyond those that we see mentioned in today's textbooks.
And lead me through some of your methodology here, Michael. Where would you suggest would be good examples which would sort of get a skeptical mind to start to think that maybe there is something in this forbidden archaeology?
Well, that's a very good question. What I noticed was that in 1859, Charles Darwin published his revolutionary book, The Origin of Species, which got people thinking that the species that exist today, be they human beings or other animals or plants, they had evolved over time from more primitive simpler types of organisms. And uh, they applied that to the human species and thought, well, there must have been a line of ancestors that were more primitive, more ape-like, going back many millions of years to the primitive apes that existed at that time. So scientists began looking for what they called the missing link. That would be some creature intermediate between modern humans and ancient apes. They were searching all over for it, but they weren't finding evidence for human beings like us. The reason I found that out was I noticed that between 1859 and 1892, there were no discoveries mentioned of this missing link. It was only in 1892 that Eugene Dubois in Java discovered what he called Pithecanthropus erectus, the Java ape man, which was a key discovery. So I asked my research assistant, because I was very confused by this gap between 1859 and 1892, and I asked him to get some archaeology textbooks from that part of the 19th century. And when he brought them to me, I saw they contained many discoveries of an ancient modern human presence at that time, going back millions of years. So the Java Man discovery, which was regarded as the first missing link, was only about 800,000 years old. So then it became a problem when that became accepted in the scientific world that, well, what are we going to do with all this evidence that's accumulated over the past 30 or 40 years showing that humans existed before that? That's when this sort of evidence became what I call forbidden, in the sense that it contradicted the emerging theory of human evolution.
That's a very
So,
interesting. I was just going to say, Michael, that's a very interesting idea in the sense that is this because evolution sort of dominated the academic institutions at this time? It became the kind of accepted orthodoxy, and that everything else was determined as unorthodox or not worthy of study. Is that what you're ultimately saying here?
well, that's what happened. Uh, there was a revolution in the understanding of the origin of species, particularly the human species, because before that, most scientists, even in the universities, accepted the idea of the Judeo-Christian idea of God creating in the beginning Adam and Eve as fully human beings, maybe about 5 or 10,000 years. So up to the beginning of the 19th century, that was the dominant idea in science and in the universities. Then what happened was, first of all, a revolution in geology. Geologists began studying the layers of earth and stone that were visible in, say, like a cliffside. And they determined that it would have taken more than 5,000 years for those layers to accumulate. So they proposed it could have taken hundreds of thousands or millions of years for these geological formations to accumulate. And that was very helpful for Darwin because for his theory of evolution to work, he needed those vast periods of time uh, for successive changes to take place in an organism. say, ancient apes and monkeys, it would take many steps over many generations for the changes to accumulate that would allow a human being to come into existence.
Now, the Darwin and his theories from the 1850s onwards obviously dominated science, but I'm assuming, Michael, you weren't the first person to maybe raise question marks, not just about the theory of evolution, but also the archaeology or the idea of when humanity began. Were you able to find in your researches people who were your forerunners, people who you were able to look at in the 20th century, who ran a sort of parallel narrative alongside the Darwinian one?
There were people who opposed the Darwinian theory of evolution, and I'm not totally against Darwin. I think he had some interesting insights, but he also understood the limitations of his own theory, which many of his modern supporters don't. Uh, for example, he recognized the problem of consciousness. That's another whole topic. Uh, so, no, I'm not the first person to oppose the Darwinian theory of evolution. I I don't think it's enough just to oppose a theory. You have to propose some alternative as well. But uh, there were a few people who had documented a few cases of archaeological discoveries that contradicted the dominant theories, but they weren't very many. I think I was the first to really systematically go through the entire history of archaeology and examine the primary scientific literature. Uh, and when I started that research, I thought, well, maybe I'll find a few more things and to add to the few things that had previously been published by others. And then maybe it'll take 8 weeks. I'll write a short pamphlet about it. I'll go on to something else. But when I started digging into the original scientific literature, I began to discover one case after another. For example, in one report, there would be a little footnote about, well, something similar had been discovered by Dr. So and so in Portugal. And I'd track that down. And then in that one, there'd be a little footnote about some other discovery that had been made and later forgotten. And I tracked that one down. And gradually, the 8 weeks of research that I originally envisioned turned into 8 months and then 8 years. And one case just led to another. So we're not just talking about a few cases here, we're talking about a vast number of them. And I think I was the first to really document the evidence on that scale. And even some of the reviewers of forbidden archaeology noted that they, there was a historian of science, David Oldroyd. He and a colleague of his wrote a 24-page review article about forbidden archaeology in Social Studies of Science, which is one of the main history and science studies journals. And he said, as a professional historian of science, I have to say I've never seen such a complete history of archaeology gone into in such depth before. So even people who may not have agreed with me were admitting that this was a real contribution. David Oldroyd asked the question, has forbidden archaeology made a contribution to the literature on paleoanthropology? That's the science of human origins. And he said yes, for two reasons. The first I already mentioned. He said nobody has really gone into the whole history of archaeology in such depth before. And second, he said the book raises important questions about truth claims in modern science. Scientists attach different levels of certainty to their theories. And as far as their theories of human evolution were concerned, they had been attaching a very high level of certainty to that theory. And David Oldroyd said in this academic review, maybe they should bring it down a notch, admit there's perhaps a little bit more uncertainty than first appears. He said that was the conclusion that he thought should be warranted by the evidence in the book. So, and another reviewer, Ken Fader, writing in Geoarchaeology, said, this is not the normal type of book that we review in a scientific journal. In contrast with most creationist literature that we've seen, this book is well written, it's well researched, it's well documented. So even the critics of the book who may not have agreed with the conclusions admitted it couldn't be ignored, it had to be considered. Another scholar wrote in British Journal for the History of Science that the book raises important questions about the epistemology of our discipline, archaeology. Of course, epistemology is the branch of philosophy that deals with how do we know things? What is evidence? How should it be considered? So he thought the book provoked a discussion about that in the discipline itself. So that's exactly what I was trying to accomplish with the book, get it to raise questions about the epistemology, the evidence, how we know things about our human past.
Michael, unfortunately, our time has passed and our time has come to an end here tonight. Tell people where they can find out more about you and where they can pick up a copy of Forbidden Archaeology.
Forbidden Archaeology and its follow-up book, Extreme Human Antiquity, which has come out very recently, are available on my website, mcremo.com. And actually, the new book, Extreme Human Antiquity, has its own website, extremehumanantiquity.com. So readers can check out things at those websites.
For now, Michael, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.